Hi, everybody. I am Cristina Mussinelli. I'm the Secretary General of the LIA Foundation, who is the coordinator of the project APACE. I really want to thank you for being here. Accessibility has become a very relevant topic in the last few years due to 2025. I just want to introduce Georg Eusler from DG Culture, Creativity and Sport of the European Commission, who is the organization that co-funded the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cristina, for introducing me briefly. Just to say a few words. Accessibility of culture is a big subject for us, and normally we would think when we talk about accessibility, it's like that people in general have access to culture, to books, to theaters, to music, to culture of any sort. And I have to say I was very impressed because just a year ago I met you, Cristina, here with your colleague Lisa, and you presented me your project that accessibility for you has a completely different connotation. And it's about, giving everybody really the right to have access to reading. Obviously, we do have a legal obligation to do this, and you were making me familiar with the difficulties sometimes this puts to the publishers, to the editors, to those ones who produce books, to make this possible, because it's technically sometimes a real challenge. But I think you also showed me the beauty of the moral obligation of doing this. We really want to do this. And then I remember very well that I was quite impressed by the figures, because you were telling me that 4%, up to 4%, so we're talking of more than 20 million people in the European Union alone who have difficulties getting access to this, so to reading. So I really very happy that Creative Europe, the program, can support this project. You're doing a wonderful job, and I'm really looking forward to seeing when you present it now how far you got so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I leave the floor to the speakers.
Thank you so much, Cristina. And thank you, Georg. It's good to see all of you this afternoon. My name is Porter Anderson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspectives magazine. We are the news medium of Frankfurt Book Fair, created to cover very specifically the international realm of publishing in the world, which is a big realm, and we try to get around to as many things as possible, and it's always good to see so many familiar faces as we move from place to place to place with these wonderful events. This is one of my favorite, and this is my third year to have the honor of being involved with the work of Fondazione LIA. It is a marvelous organization that's leading the way in so many, many ways. And most particularly in what we're going to be talking about in part this afternoon, the APACE, if you will, study. I call it APACE because it's nicer in Italian than it sounds in English. But it's a really wonderful program that's actually starting to give us information about exactly where we are in terms of approaching the European Accessibility Act of 2025, and that would be June 2025, June 28, I think is the exact day. And suddenly a lot of people are having to sit up and take notice, because as that act goes into force, the pressures will be felt within the bloc to conform and to start doing some very wonderful supportive things about accessibility. Let me read you just a few notes that will ground us a bit in a quick introduction, and then I'll bring in our speakers, the first of them being Elisa, whom I know that many of you know. There are just 255 days left until the European Accessibility Act takes effect. In the United States, the only countdown we hear now is the one to the election. This is so refreshing. And it's a bigger countdown, too. There's more time. This is a fascinating program, though. The introduction of that legislation has been amazing to watch. And we're all, those of us who are so supportive of seeing this movement in publishing get forward and get going, are excited about this deadline. After years of discussion, the question is, however, are you ready for it? Are you able to make the date when the time comes? It is not necessarily an idle question as the thing starts approaching us. In previous years, we stood on this stage here in this room to discuss raising awareness about the Act and its implications. Last year, we emphasized the roles that every player in the digital publishing ecosystem must take to achieve accessibility. This seminar, organized by Fondazione LIA in collaboration with Frankfurter Buchmesse, the Börsenverein, and the Federation of European Publishers, always great to work with, the International Publishers Association, and the framework of the APACE project. They all aim together to mark the beginning of the accessibility era in the publishing industry as a whole. All kinds of publishers, even if today we have representatives from 2 major houses, and all the actors of the value chain. Today we're going to hear from projects and publishers who've been working on this for some time, obviously, and can share valuable lessons and things that they have seen occur, maybe something they didn't expect, maybe something they did expect, and what it truly means to try to integrate accessibility as a core value in a publisher's strategy and the results that have already been achieved. Briefly, let me just tell you who you're seeing here on stage with me, and then we'll move to our first comment coming in to us with some information from Elisa. Saying her name, Elisa Molinari is, of course, the coordinator of the project APACE, and let me tell you what it means. APACE, or APACE, means Accelerating Publishing Accessibility Through Collaboration in Europe. And it's great. It's a network of organizations which are actually giving us data so we know who is ready, who is not, how far do we have to go, what are the stumbling blocks, where are the barriers appearing. Knowledge is everything, and this is finally getting us some of the knowledge we needed. It's a wonderful program. Elisa, could you start us off with your presentation, and then we'll get to, next after Elisa, Alessandra Porcelli, and she is with Mondadori, of course, and Simon Holt of Elsevier. And first, we hear from Elisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Porter, for the introduction, and welcome you all on behalf of the APACE project. Thank you, Porter, also for spelling out the name. I usually get confused when I have to spell it out in front of an audience, so it's Accelerating Publishing Accessibility Through Collaboration in Europe. So for those of you who are not familiar with, let me see, okay, with the project, what is it? It's a European project co-funded within the Creative Europe program, and it's a network of 7 organizations led by Fondazione LIA, which is this Italian not-for-profit organization that's been working with the publishing industry for over 10 years now. So it's a network of mainly 2 communities. On one side, Publisher Association, so the association that represents publishers in Italy, Germany, and Bulgaria, plus 3 libraries serving persons with print disabilities. So the organization that historically have been providing accessible versions like print braille, enlarged characters, and audio. As Porter was saying, this directive is setting a new framework for all of those who work in the accessibility field. So the goal of the network is to create a dialogue between those 2 communities rather than create a friction. So those 2 communities that have been working together and will continue to do so in the forthcoming months to create a bridge and to create occasions overall for publishing professionals at large to better enhance their skill. So the main activities of the projects are related to capacity building, so providing European professionals occasions to learn skills about accessibility. So we are delving into and plan to do so in the future. Focusing on different aspects of accessibility, from the most technical ones to the editorial ones, as well as networking activities. We believe that connections at all levels is crucial to further improve accessibility. That said, the first starting point of the project was to develop a survey targeted to the 2 communities, publisher on one side and libraries on the others. First, because it's always nice to have a presentation with some data, as Porter suggested, but mainly because we want to address our initiatives to topics that are of interest for the community. So we developed 2 surveys, one for publishers and one for libraries, that in this way we were able to gather data from 17 countries at European level. So the report that is today published on the website of a project The website is called European Accessibility Directory. I'll share a link to download it so you don't need to take notes as I speak. Gathers those kind of information. In the next minutes, I'm going to show you some of those data. First, let's focus on the publishing part. It's worth mentioning that the data that we collected are quite interesting because we were able to reach different kinds of publishers. For sure in terms of turnover, so about half of them are micro-enterprises, so publishers that do not need to comply to the directive. So this is a very important topic, and we'll get to that later on. And also in terms of sectors, we were able to reach publishers from, okay, something is happening on this monitor, but I'll keep talking. Publishers from different sectors. Okay, thank you so much for fixing it. Okay, so in this slide, some key data to start the conversation. So we wanted to ask publishers about the impact of the directive. So again, it's important saying, are you ready for this? So let's start by saying that about 80% produce ebooks, which is one of the services covered by the directive, so pretty high percentage. And I think the most important data is that 70% of respondents, included the half of the micro-enterprises, believe the directive will impact their publishing house. Meaning that, like it or not, this directive is going to have a huge impact on the publishing industry as a whole. So not just big publishers, and we are blessed to have two of those today speaking about their strategies and the work they've been doing in the past years, but also small, medium-sized publishers. Moving on, in terms of readiness for the EA, about 30% declares to be have already started a roadmap, a journey toward accessibility, and a further 25% is developing a strategy. To end with some other data, 37% declare that they are already producing accessible publications, so less than a half. But another 37 is expecting to do so in the near future. So the industry is moving rapidly to meet the end. In the survey, we wanted to understand, well, how they're doing, but also how much accessibility is part of a strategy. Allow me just 30 seconds with the head of Fondazione LIA, please, saying that we've been working with publishers for over 10 years now, and we witnessed that companies where accessibility is part of the overall strategies where the results are the better. So when the management is involved, is that where the results are of longer term. So in this survey, we were able to see that top management is highly involved, followed by production, digital editorial, and the others. Worth mentioning that also authors are involved. A thing that it's quite important to note is that usually we think that accessibility is just a matter of production of tech departments. It is for sure, but it's also a matter of editorial. So it's worth mentioning that also the editorial departments are moving there. What about ebooks? Again, the data that we got tell us that the publishing industry is quite composed, and there's no a unique formula for everyone. So in terms of production, we noted that about 38% handle this activity in-house, 23 rely on suppliers, and 37 have a mix of both. So again, there's no magic formula for all the publishers. And in terms of tools, I'm glad that we followed up a seminar with colleagues of Adobe, LIA, Daisy, and FEP about the improvements of InDesign, as it's the software used by 83% of the industry. So, as for formats, it's worth noting also that EPUB 3, the flowable, is the most used one with a percentage of 55%, followed by PDF. EPUB 3 is the standard where accessibility, which allows the most accessibility, so it's worth mentioning that it's the most used one. And then we provided a sort of focus about accessible ebooks. Just a couple of information here that we think are worth mentioning. First is that we asked publishers if they have guidelines to produce accessible publication. Well, over the half responded that they do, showing that accessibility is becoming a core of production. So either if you do it in-house, outside, or a mix of both, publishing houses are starting to provide guidelines to vendors or in-house to have it in their workflows. Another aspect is image description. We ask if they take care of it, about 73% does. And this responsibility, I'm pretty sure this is a topic that my colleagues will cover in a moment, falls into the editorial department the most, followed by authors and also some external suppliers. We talk a lot about production. Distribution is as important as production, so it's not enough to produce accessible publication. It's crucial as well to distribute the characteristics that describe the features of accessibility of those publications. That's where metadata come to the table. More than a half of publishers declare to use accessibility metadata, especially in EPUB accessibility metadata standard, followed by Onyx. And as for DRMs, Watermark is the most used one, followed by Adobe and Rhodium. Last, we ask about training needs. In this graphic we are showing, you will see a lot of lines, a lot of colors, showing that the industry is really interested in a lot of topics, and we'll try to address them as APACE in the forthcoming months, from remediation for the backlist, automation of workflows, artificial intelligence, and so on. So again, it's an industry that needs programs to support their training needs. In the second part of the survey, we focused on the libraries serving persons with print impairment. We were able to reach quite a significant number of them. Again, they are the organizations, for those who are not familiar with the libraries, who have historically been providing accessible versions, and they serve persons with different disabilities, from blindness to low vision, dyslexia, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, motor disabilities, and so on. What does the survey say? Well, they produce different categories of books, from fiction, non-fiction, to children's university books, textbooks, and in some cases also comics books. So they are realities that produce the whole range of publication. It's worth mentioning that 13 out of 14 create and distribute alternative version as print braille, and they are starting to produce also digital publication in various formats, as well as tactile version. A key topic that we're going to address in the forthcoming months is distribution. Differently from the publishing world, the libraries use different metadata standards, especially Unimark and Mark, that today do not have a specific detailed code list for accessibility as the one available in Onyx. So there's a lot of work underway in the International Federation of Library Associations. Did I say it correctly? Okay, IFLA, with the collaboration of colleagues of LIA and other organizations. So on that front, we are going to hear more in the forthcoming months. As of training, again, a lot of training needs. For sure, AI and production are at the top of the chain, followed by image description and other all the other topics of interest of the publishing industry. So to sum up, what about this report? So I think it's safe to say that this report highlights how the publishing sector in Europe and the libraries have a proactive response to this accessibility landscape. So they are moving for sure, but the level of readiness is quite varied. So for sure, we need to take that into consideration and provide as many occasions of training and connection as possible. Again, as the topics, we feel that standards, image description, and quality assurance could be further addressed, as challenges remain, especially in the realm of backlist remediation, automation of workflows, and AI. For sure, no seminar is complete without saying AI, so I'm glad that we covered this also in this one. Okay, I think it's time to leave the floor to two speakers who have been actually working on that. If you're interested in the survey, this is a QR code where you can download the survey with the whole data. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elisa. Alessandra Porcelli.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. Today we would like to share, just waiting for my slide to pop up. There we go. So today it will be a pleasure to share with you the approach that Mondadori Group educational area decided to take on accessibility. I'm the new business director and I work for the educational area of Mondadori. As you know, Mondadori covers several businesses in Italy, but only educational area is going to be the focus today. So the educational business unit involves 3 different companies: School Books Publishing and Mondadori Education, Rizzoli Education, and Dia Scuola. We have a massive production of school books every year, around about 600 volumes and 200,000 pages. So this needs industrialized processes and flows, as you can imagine. So when we started working on this project on accessibility, and actually I've been managing this project for quite a while now, we decided to set up some objectives for ourselves. First of all, of course, we wanted to get to 2025 with an accessible production, and we decided to approach this project in a very consistent way across the business unit, because recently the 3 companies merged with just one unique digital proprietary platform, and therefore it made sense for us to have some ebooks with consistent outputs that we could produce with consistent flows and processes. Because so far, I have to say, we used to have different processes for our ebooks production. And this is one last point which was really difficult to make decisions on. We wanted to preserve our current outputs on our paper books because our process is from print to digital, and normally our ebooks mirror our paper outputs, and we wanted to preserve our customer experience. You know that school books are really complicated in terms of graphics, layout, design, and when we were trying to analyze the way to make them accessible, we really got stuck for a while because there are a number of complex objects that we thought at the very beginning we wouldn't be able to make accessible, and we were thinking that we might have to simplify our structures, our design, and to make our customer experience poorer, and we didn't want that. But finally, we found solutions, and this was an important step because it gave us the route to really follow up with our work and define our processes and flows. So once we defined our objectives, we really got started with the project, and we had to set up a team to work on the project. We had to define roles and responsibilities, and of course, we wanted from the very beginning have some experts next to us, some accessibility experts, and in our case, it was Fondazione LIA, who has been working with us for a long time now. We also tried to clarify which kind of competencies we needed in this team. We needed people with the knowledge of pre-press production and flows, knowledge of InDesign, digital ebooks production, but also digital asset production, because when we talk about accessibility, we talk about interactive exercise as well. We needed someone with knowledge of digital platform management, because we have our own proprietary platform, and somebody from R&D and project management. So quite a wide range of competencies that we needed in this project. And because, as I mentioned, we had to involve the 3 companies in the business unit, we also had to make sure we had people representative from each company and each role in our team, which led us to have a very large team of 17 people, which of course we couldn't manage on a daily basis. So we set up a core team made of just 4 people trying to cover the main roles, a team that manages the project on a daily basis. And this team is made up by a PMO, a digital operations director, ebook production manager, and R&D manager. This role has been, of course, key for us during the whole work. And we can rely on an operational team when it's needed to get some vertical competence on specific topics. And of course, we report into a steering committee where the key stakeholders are the publishing directors and the print production director. And of course, we have a higher level committee where the MD is involved. Elisa, you were mentioning that, when a higher manager are involved, the project is successful, and of course, commercial directors, marketing managers, because accessibility impacts the whole strategy of the publishing house. So this has been a long journey for us. We started back in 2023, and the first thing we did, thanks to the help of Fondazione LIA, was to have an audit on our ebooks and our platform. That was fundamental to do our gap analysis and then to get started. And we decided to provide an extensive training to people involved in the business unit, because we thought this was the real foundation of the project. And now, retrospectively, I'm really glad we did so. We put some initial assumptions, which is what I've mentioned already. We wanted to keep our customer experience on paper books, and that gave us the direction for the following phase, which was really, really intense this year. So we did gap analysis, and then we had to find solutions to fulfill the requirement. So alt text was one of those, and it was not only a solution for images and illustrations, but also for those complex subjects I was mentioning earlier that at the very beginning seemed to be impossible to make accessible. We did a semantic mapping and tagging. This was really a little bit complex for us, because when it comes to school books, every single book has its own layout, design, and therefore we need to do a very comprehensive mapping to make sure that all features are represented in this mapping for the future of production. We set up new rules for pre-press vendors with the scouting of new vendors, and we started to design new flows. And of course, the testing phase was really key to put together the requirements for the development of our new HTML and our platforms and reader solutions. Eventually, next year, we are going to release and implement our ecosystem, our accessible ecosystem. And I'm talking about ecosystem because it goes from ebooks to reader solution, to the digital platform, e-commerce, websites. So it's a whole ecosystem. And we're going to provide more training to our vendors and our internal roles, because of course we set up new rules, we set up new flows, and we need to share them. And Fondazione LIA was next to us during all this journey. We did encounter some challenges, because I would be a liar if I said we didn't, but we managed to overcome them. The first challenge was the complexity of e-books in terms of school books, as mentioned earlier, and the fact that we had to deal with a massive production, as mentioned before, and also we had to deliver in a very short window of time that we can't miss. And of course, time constraint makes things more difficult. And as mentioned, we needed to preserve our current outputs. So we knew from the very beginning we wouldn't be able to produce 2025 production with ideal flows and with the perfect flows, because this is an ongoing project. We tried to have a very practical approach, and we decided that we didn't want to put at risk our print production, because our process is from print to digital, really. So we carried on with our work on print, and in the same time, we tried to fix everything in terms of flows and processes. And we decided to act in post-production in year one, because it was a safer solution, but it's not the final solution, because in year two, we are going to move many of our activities in the pre-press phase once we've done some training on vendors and we make sure that everything is really settled down. And we're going to probably have less costs, because we're going to move all those activities before we produce the HTML with a smoother process. And then, of course, we will keep studying and exploring technology, because technology evolves, and we need to evolve together with technology. So to sum up, I would say that the Accessibility Act really gave us a chance to have some internal benefits which go beyond accessibility purposes. because we managed to review our processes, to streamline our processes, make them more consistent, find efficiencies, and explore new vendors and technologies because we were forced to, but this opened a perspective to us also for the future. And if I had to provide a piece of advice to anyone who still needs to approach accessibility, I will say, I didn't speak with Elisa earlier, but I can say we are aligned. Have senior leadership on board from the very beginning, because this is going to help you throughout the journey. Set up a project team, make sure you've got the right competencies in your team with a clear governance. Provide training as soon as possible to as many people as possible. Have some consultant, expert on accessibility working next to you, because you risk wasting a lot of time finding solutions that maybe already exist. Set up expectations for year one and define your own roadmap, and have an open mindset, because as mentioned already, this is an ongoing project. I'm sure no one is going to have the same flows next year and in 3 years' time. So we have to keep looking and improving with the technology that evolves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alessandra. And here is Simon Holt. He is Senior Project Manager for Content Accessibility at Elsevier. And he's worked in academic publishing as well as across books and journals for 15 years. Go right ahead, please, Simon. It's all yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, I've got a hard act to follow. I've got to say that. Hi, everybody. So, as Porter just said, my name's Simon. I work with Elsevier, the science publisher, and I lead our content accessibility efforts, obviously with a really talented team of people. And I wanted to take some time today just to talk about what we've done around the European Accessibility Act and elsewhere, and also what's to come, what's gone well, where the challenges are, and also maybe just give people here a bit of food for thought in terms of where they might want to go. And so, as you can see, for those of you who maybe haven't seen me before, I'm a blind person myself. I'm registered blind. And so I wanted just to talk about who this is for, right? We often talk about accessibility in terms of compliance and law and stuff, but actually this is about empowering people. This is about making sure that people have the information they need in order to make the right decisions, right? Or, as Porter was saying before, have the information and access to words and pictures in order to live full, independent lives. And so when we think about this, we're thinking not just about visually impaired people, though that's often what we think about when we talk about accessibility, but we're also thinking about hearing impaired people, we're talking about dyslexic people, we're talking about dyspraxic people. In fact, 15% of the world's working age population have a disability. That's over 1 billion people worldwide. So when we think about our job as publishers, really, we're talking about accessibility, allowing us to reach a whole load of people that we otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. I can't think of anything more central to our mission than that. Next slide, please. So thinking a bit further to that, I just kind of wanted to think about the whole accessibility sphere as something that speaks to publishers, as well as something, obviously, that speaks to people with disabilities. As publishers, our job is to curate, enrich, and disseminate content. By making content accessible, we're clearly making it easier to find, because, for example, without text, we're converting a non-text asset into a text asset, so it's better for SEO. We're enriching it, allowing people to access information in multiple ways. And therefore, we're making it easier to use, easier to navigate, and therefore easier for people to get the information they need, which is really what our industry is all about. Next slide, please. So, when we think about the European Accessibility Act, how does that feed in? Well, I think it's worthwhile saying the European Accessibility Act is not just about publishing. Obviously, that's kind of where we really hear about it. It's actually designed to help make the lives of people with disabilities much more independent and richer and fuller than they were before. And as a disabled person myself, I really appreciate that. The two bits of the Act that really pertain to us are about ebooks and e-commerce. So the books themselves and also how you go about buying them. It's probably worth saying that this Act was passed in 2019, so it's been a while coming. And it's been quite interesting to observe the journey that publishers have been taking between then and now. It's amazing to see the progress made, and I'm looking forward to seeing the progress made between now and next June and beyond that as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of the requirements for ebooks, I thought it would just be helpful to set them out here, right? So the idea is that a book needs to be accessible to all of those groups of people that I mentioned at the beginning here, right? So that means that if you can't see images, there's a description you can access with your screen reader. If you can't hear video content, then there are captions and transcripts that will help you. That things are published in reflowable content, reflowable format, sorry, so you're able to enlarge the text, and that PDFs are tagged so that you can use them with assistive technology. Most important, I think, here, around the ebooks and the e-commerce is around metadata. And I think for me as an individual, this is probably the bit that I'm most excited about in terms of the European Accessibility Act, which basically means that when you publish a book, you have to explain what accessibility features it has so that the purchaser, the reader, can make an informed choice about what it is that they're getting. As someone in the past who's purchased various different things, not just books, but lots of things, only to find that I can't use them, I think it's amazing that somebody is going to be able to have the knowledge about the accessibility of a product, whether it's a book or elsewhere, before they buy. I think that's going to be transformational. So that's for ebooks and kind of what we have to do. Next slide, please. For e-commerce, it's about making sure that not just the book itself is accessible, but the journey that the customer takes in order to buy the book is fully accessible as well. So that's everything from logging in, to finding the book, to purchasing the book, to receiving the book. And crucially, that also includes the help and support pages and services that you're offering as a publisher as well. Because at the end of the day, there's no point in having accessible content if people aren't able to find it or people aren't able to buy it. So I think the e-commerce aspect is really important as well in terms of your consideration and in terms of moving the needle in order to make our publishing more accessible. Next slide, please. So obviously I've come here to talk about Elsevier and how we're approaching it. And each publisher will have their own challenges, right? For us, it's that we're a big publisher, right? We publish lots of books, lots of journal content, and so therefore publishing at scale, and given that we publish lots of different types of content as well, right? So loads of different types of books. It's the complexity of it that we really need to think about, and really how to do this, thinking about both the front list, so the go-forward titles, and the back list, right? So, we have thousands and thousands of titles that were published in the past, thousands more titles we publish every year. And really the reality is, okay, how are we going to do this in what I'm calling a sustainable way? Because at the end of the day, we don't just need to make our publishing accessible today. We need to make it accessible tomorrow, the next day, the next week, and the next month. And therefore, our approach to this has been completely thinking about this from a scalable point of view. So that's using automation as much as we can. It means workflows. It means collaboration between people, and it's really trying to develop standardized solutions as opposed to bespoke ones, because that means that you get sustainable workflows and solutions, not just now, but in the future as well. Next slide, please. So how are we going about this? And when I got asked to speak, I got asked, could I really focus on how Elsevier is going about this? And I think the thing that I want to sort of emphasize here is that we think it's really important to emphasize that accessibility is a challenge for everybody within the organization, right? It's not just about one or two people. So as you can see here, we conform to industry standards. We are collaborative, not just at Elsevier, but across the whole industry as well. We're glad to be part of groups like the FEP, DAISY Consortium, UK Publishers Accessibility Group, and various other industry organizations as well. Because actually, we feel that accessibility is something that we need to tackle together as an industry, which is why I'm so happy that panels like this and conversations like this are happening. Within Elsevier, we feel the same, right? So it's not like one department's job or one team's job. What we try to do is have a mix between a centralized approach, so there's a small central team, led by a couple of us, so me for content, somebody else for technology, and we have Mike, a program manager, who's somewhere in the audience. And then beyond that, we have lots of people throughout the organization who are doing accessibility as part of their role. And we think this is really important because if accessibility is going to work, this really needs to be integrated within the organization. For too long, accessibility within publishing has been an extra, a nice to have. But actually, if we're talking about reaching all the people that we need to reach and we want to reach, accessibility needs to be integrated within everything that we do every day, at every stage of the publishing workflow. And the way that you do that is by making sure that, not by creating realms and realms of accessibility specialists, but actually by having a small team who drive the strategy and then making sure that people are trained properly in their day jobs, people in production, editorial, in marketing, etc., and so they're able to make accessible products, because actually Born Accessible is really the way forward, not just for people with disabilities, but for everybody, in terms of greater choice, in terms of usage, greater discoverability, and greater flexibility in terms of product, right? So that's why this champions model, where we have accessibility, trained accessibility experts in every department, is really making a difference to making sure that everybody has the knowledge they need to understand what has to be done and how to make this successful. Next slide, please. So, sorry. In terms of where we're going, in terms of the EAA, really, we're going to use this model and we're going to continue to roll it out to everybody across the organisation, because we feel that the EAA is indeed the start of the accessibility era. When we were thinking about how to really structure this within the organisation, we wanted to make sure this wasn't just a one and done kind of thing, but actually that we were thinking about the future. We were thinking about different product types. We were thinking about different needs that different groups of people might have, or indeed different laws that might be passed. So what we think we have here is quite a robust model that will hopefully stand the test of time. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? So I thought it might be helpful to include this slide, and I'm sure the slide will be made available later. As you can see, I focus on content accessibility. So I focus on the things on the right-hand side. So we're talking here about alt text, we're talking about video, we're talking about accessible formats, we're talking about metadata here. But we also need to think about platforms, products, websites, and indeed everything that is involved in the purchase and the reading of a title. And as you can see here, there's a whole load of things that we need to think about in terms of standards, in terms of documentation, in terms of assessment, and in terms of remediation. And therefore, that's why it's important that we really take a whole company approach to this, as opposed to just thinking that it's one or two people's jobs, because actually the task is too big otherwise, right? You know, for us at Elsevier, I think I read the other day, we publish 17% of the world's scientific content, and therefore it's super important that we're able to spread the load. So this is doable, otherwise it just becomes too much. Next slide, please. So what does good look like? And I think it would be super easy for me to stand here, right, and say, you know, we've got it all sorted, there's no problems, you know, we're going to get everything done, front list, back list, easy peasy. It's not like that, as Alessandra was saying, right? There are challenges, right? There are some things that come up that you don't think about. There are other things just due to the complexity of our material that is difficult, right? And so therefore we need to think, okay, what's viable, what makes sure we're compliant, and where do we want to go next? So by the deadline, we'll certainly have got all our front lists sorted. I'm not concerned about that. In terms of the backlist, we will have made a great start. We'll make sure that all our recent and most purchased content is accessible, and we'll make sure that we have a request service in place so that if people need something in an accessible format, they will have it. We'll also really crucially have set some of the systems in place to make sure that when we're expanding to other formats like journals in the future, that we know how to do that, right? So, you know, AI is obviously the world's most popular phrase at the moment, but we're looking at AI at the moment. Where does it work? Where does it not work? where can it help us with some solutions? Where's it not going to be the answer, right? And where is it partially the answer, but we also need other answers as well? And we see the European Accessibility Act as a great opportunity, really, to try things out, to make sure that we're compliant, obviously, but to make sure that what we're setting in place will really see us well for the future. As I said, not just today, but for tomorrow as well. Next slide, please. So here is an idea for a roadmap, right? I'm not going to say that this is 100% what we're going to do, but here are some ideas of how you might look at phasing this, right? So you start off with books, and you move on to journals, and you move on to systems, and you move on to infrastructure, and you make sure that you phase it so that what we have is moving towards accessibility month on month, but doing it in a sustainable way that really means that it works for our readers, it works for our authors, and it works for us as publishers as well, to make sure that our workplace is sustainable, right? And that we're able to do this, and we're not saying, okay, all of a sudden we need to deal with thousands and thousands and thousands of books at once. We need to think about this in a sustainable way, making sure that we continue to make progress, whilst also making sure that this aligns well with all the other systems and goals and programs that we have at the company, because as I said, accessibility works when it's part of something, when it's aligned with something, not when it's separate with something, when it's a permanent thing, not when it's a one-off. Next slide, please. So finally, I wanted just to kind of put here 3 questions that I often get asked, right, about authors, about AI, and about the backlist, and kind of how are we approaching this. So in terms of authors, to start with, these are questions I get a lot, right? So I just thought they might make good discussion topics, or you might just find them interesting. In terms of authors, we feel that authors really play a role in terms of their scientific expertise. That's what they're there for, right? Actually, for me, and I can only talk about my opinion, I think the Venn diagram of authors who want to write alt text for 200 images per book and who are experts in writing alt text, which is technical writing, is quite small. We think the author's best value here is reviewing alt text, right? Making sure it's accurate, making sure it's relevant, and making sure it's complete. So that's what we're going to do. For us, it's about using authors in the right way and making sure that we're getting the most value from the services that they offer and making sure that we can sustain this as well. We've done pilots before of having authors write alt text, and we find that what will happen is, say, in an edited book, one chapter will have it, another chapter won't. Or even within the same chapter, not all the images will have it. Because this is a compliance thing, and because we want a consistent experience for our readers, it's really important that we play a role in providing this, and then we get authors to review to make sure it's right. Similarly with AI, like a lot of things, AI shows a lot of potential and it can really help us streamline, but it's not the answer by itself. It's great to help us draft things, it's great in process automation, but the idea that we could just outsource accessibility to AI just isn't a thing. Accessibility is about context, alt text is about context, right? And it's about making sure that the reader has the right experience. And that means that we use AI where we can, but it's always augmented with human beings, right? That's in our responsible use of AI policy, and that's something that we're firmly committed to. We're not interested in just using AI without human beings to make sure the quality is right. And finally, about the backlist. So as I mentioned, we're starting off with our most recent and most used titles. That's the right thing to do, because it means that the titles that most people are going to buy will be accessible straight away. We will then make on request titles in accessible formats where we haven't managed, they just haven't got to the front of the phasing, the front of the queue yet, to make sure that if somebody needs a title, we can give it to them in short order. For me, that's a good example of making sure that all our content is available as per the Act, but also being realistic. I think I read the other day we have about 90,000 titles in our backlist. We're clearly not going to remediate those all in a week or a month. So therefore, we need to think about, okay, practically, how do we make this work? So it works for readers, but it also is viable for us as a publisher as well. And I think that underlines our approach. You know, finally, so we're a team, right? We get a lot of people involved in this, and it's great to see so many people across Elsevier who are passionate about accessibility. We make sure we're doing the right thing for our readers, but we're also making sure that this is sustainable, so it aligns and integrates well with all the other stuff that we do as a publisher from start to finish. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Simon. Because we are getting close on our time, I want to move quickly to our folks here for just a couple of quick questions to follow up with. But before I do that, I would like to ask, since again we are close to our time, whether there is someone in the house who has a question they'd like to put across right away. We're looking at about 10 minutes. Here's someone. Do we have a microphone?
Don't worry, I've got quite a booming voice.
Good voice, do that.
Excuse me. My name's Mike Fuchs. I'm the program manager that Simon mentioned, working in Elsevier.
Fantastic.
So for our fellow publishing house, just a quick question about your approach to customer support, which is something which we're frankly just kicking off and looking at, how we provide accessible customer support about the content, about the person's experience of purchasing that content. I wonder if you've got any sage words that you can share with us.
It's a very nice question. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The answer is quick because we are working on it, but we are not there yet. So unfortunately, I don't have much to share today. Next time. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Yeah, Elisa, have you come across this before? The question of how they're supported, these new endeavors when people get going.
Yep.
No.
So just to, again, I'll answer as Fondazione LIA right now, not wearing the APACE hat. Sorry for that. But yeah, as mentioned maybe in the slides before, speaking as a company that provides training for publishers, we've usually provided, for example, training courses, general training courses for the whole publishing house, so that every department is up to date with this, from the production, distribution, but also customer care, because it's important that everyone that communicates the publishing house, not just for the metadata that go along the book value chain, but also persons who actually have contacts with users are aligned with that. So I'm sorry to be quite boring, stressing how training is crucial, but having everyone on board for sure has shown to be a key to actually reach all the customers and provide sound and solid support for users.
Thank you.
Simon, did you have something?
No, nothing.
You look like you
additional
were
to
moved to
what's been
speak.
said.
That's fine.
No.
No problem. Anyone else with a question? I'll try to see if I can see you. We've got very bright lights there. Okay, then at this point, I'm not seeing anything. Somebody shout to me if you do. I do want to ask our guest a couple of things then with the time we've got. In the question of preparedness and the impact of the Act coming, Elisa, one of the things that I know we talked about is which kind of initiatives do you think can further foster the adoption?
It's really a pity that we have just a few minutes because I have a huge list of things that I would like to talk about. I'll be brief. So 3 things. Well, the first is not an action, but it's more of a wish, as my Secretary General always loves to remind us. The ultimate goal is for accessibility experts to disappear, meaning that accessibility is integrated in the mainstream production and distribution. So that's the ultimate goal. In the meantime, for sure, there are some actions. For sure, again, training. As we've seen, all publishers, also small and medium size, are willing to, but somehow lack of funding and programs are not helping in this way. So all the programs that can speed up and foster that. Mm-hmm. And the other theme is research and development. So we touch base with AI, image description, so activities that can help and support the publishing industry to speed up some processes could be highly beneficial and benefit the whole industry.
I think that's fantastic. And that's a very quick, good answer. Thank you for that. Alessandra, let me ask you one thing too. You were talking about the extensive training initiative that's important. Can you tell us which teams and roles are involved?
We tried to do as extensive as we could. So we didn't involve only editorials. We involved multimedia people. We involved production people. We involved marketing people. But the thing that I would like to emphasize is we didn't involve only operational teams. We involved managers at all levels, even senior managers from commercial offices, from marketing, and that's because, as mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that everyone was aligned. We wanted to spread the accessibility culture across the BU, and we wanted to make sure that when time comes for making decisions, like now, we have everyone on board already, because we couldn't afford now to go back and bring on board everyone, because it would take too long. So basically nearly everyone, but we've got the customer support to take care of still.
I think it's a good answer, everyone. And lastly, is there somebody out there? I'm going to give you one more chance. Going. Everybody good?
Maybe Porter on your right.
Yeah. Oh, is there somebody there? Good. Hi. Go right ahead.
My question is about formats. So we've tried EPUB 3 and found that there's been very little pickup of that format. And we've also tried putting what would have been a PDF into a web format, so just as HTML, and that has been picked up way more and is discoverable because we SEO the website. Is there a reason why we shouldn't be going the HTML route rather than the EPUB 3? Because it seems like the user pickup is way higher on the web version.
That's a very good question.
I can take that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't know about your particular kind of publishing, but I think the obvious answer to me is people access content offline as well as online, right? And certainly a lot of people with accessibility needs like to download things to their devices, either because it's easier with the assistive technology that they've got, or because they want to reflow the format in a way that may be difficult if they have low bandwidth, for instance, right? So I think I'd say the not only but also. I think web PDFs are fine. And HTML is certainly fine. I'd say about PDF in general, it can never be fully accessible, right? You can make it more accessible with tagging it properly, but one thing that both WCAG and the European Accessibility Act talk about is reflowable content, which is super important if you have accessibility needs, and that's something a PDF can never offer because it's a static format, right? So EPUB 3 is the only format that is fully accessible, and I think often part of the reason that you might get low pickup is because of familiarity bias, right? People will do what they've always done, and most people, are familiar and comfortable with that. I think for us, it's about educating people and really making sure that it's easy for people to access EPUBs with the right players and what have you, and the right download formats. And I think looking longer term, I know some publishers are actually going to stop providing EPUBs. They're going to stop providing PDFs in the future because they really want people to make that transition to EPUB, and I think that's great news from an accessibility point of view.
Great answer. Thank you, Simon. You got a lot in there in a very short amount of time, too. Elisa, you're saying something here.
It's not an answer, but it's an invitation, as this topic for sure is of interest. I just want to invite you all upstairs in a minute, as we're going to have a meetup, so an occasions where to speak about accessibility. Production is one of them. So we are meeting upstairs in room Entente. So I guess it's an invitation for you all to join us for something to drink and eat and talk more about accessibility with our speakers today and everyone who's here.
Terrific. That sounds great. I want to thank all of you who have been here today. This is a wonderful project, and I'm glad to see your interest, and I hope you will take Elisa up on this. I hope that we can also thank Simon and Alessandra. And I would like to invite you back at 4 p.m. if you're interested in audio in publishing. I have a terrific panel in the Publishing Perspectives Forum, so I hope you'll join us then. Thank you for being here. Christina, thank you too. I see you in the light.